Welcome to the Book Talk Babes podcast. This episode may contain explicit language. I will do my best for it not to. It should not contain any spoilers, but just in case, please check the episode description for a list of books that were spoiled. My name is Ashley, and today will be a little different than our previous episodes. Elaine and Liana were unable to join me this week, so it is a solo episode. Hopefully, I don't bore you too badly. The topic today is going to be reading slumps, mainly my reading slump, but I do have my own experience. I got some tips and recommendations from my friends on Instagram. So let's get to it. Most of us have experienced a reading slump. If you haven't, or if you are not part of the online book community, you may not know what a reading slump is. But basically, it is when you have little to no interest in reading anything. You may really want to read, but no matter how hard you try or how badly you want to, you just can't focus on anything. It feels like a large number of people seem to be in one right now, especially in the online book community. I truly feel deep down in my soul that is partly because most of us in the online book community are just going nonstop, especially starting in January. We're trying to keep up with, new releases, popular books, trends, things like that. So I feel like it's just a natural progression to get to a point where you're burnt out and then you kind of get in this reading slump in the middle of the year. So some people it hits in May, some people it's June, some people it's July, but it's always one of these mid-year months where people, I think, start to struggle with reading the same amount or at the same speed that they have been since January. So I know for me personally, a memory just popped up on Instagram for last June, which I was in the exact same boat. Well, okay, I was almost in the same boat as I am now. Last June, I only read one book because of my reading slump. This year, I have a few books that have some kind of obligation or deadlines that involve other people. So for the month of June, I will definitely have read more than one book this year, but that doesn't change the fact that I am in a bad reading slump. So I've been reading the same 5 books since the beginning of May. And I know for most people that read a large sum of books, that being in a reading slump is just annoying. We all know that it's annoying. For me currently right now, it is so inconvenient to be in a reading slump. Of my 5 books, 2 are for future podcast episodes, and then 2 have obligations to other people that are non-podcast related. But it's been rough, y'all. So for me personally, the book slump that I am in, I try to analyze and figure out why I'm in slumps when I get into them. Is it like external things going on in my life? Is it book related? Is it online book community related? Am I starting to feel pressure from other people or trying to keep up with other people's stats and things like that? I really try not to, but there are times where I can't help it. We all at some point, I think, we all potentially end up at a place in life where we will start to compare ourselves to others. So I used to do that when I started my online book journey. I don't do that so much anymore, but the 2 books I have for the podcast are A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have noticed on my stories that I have talked about this one, I think, twice now in my reading updates, maybe just once. I can't remember. But I've talked about this on my stories and my reading updates and how I am just not interested in this book. I know a lot of people say it's really good and it really affects a lot of people in different ways. So I'm going to push through. I'm hoping at some point I'll start to like it more. I have plenty of things to say of the very small amount that I have read so far, but we are going to do a couple of episodes on that book, so I'll save it for that. The other book I'm reading for the podcast is Everlasting by Mickey Madden. This one we are doing as a judge a book by its cover episode. So before we started it, we did record our impressions just based off of the cover and what is written in the back. It's a little dated, so it's been hard for me to, put myself in the headspace that I need to be able to read this book. So I don't know. It is a romance. At the time of its release, it probably would have, I assume it would have been considered a contemporary romance to some degree. But it came out in 1994. So yeah, you can tell while reading it. But we'll see. And I don't have to be reading a fantasy book or a romance book to enjoy it. I enjoy historical fiction. I enjoy contemporary books or contemporary romance books. I enjoy a wide variety of things, but for whatever reason, A Little Life and Everlasting, I couldn't be less interested. So I don't know if they're what put me in my slump, or I think it's a combination of that and then the 2 books I'm about to describe to you. So the next 2 books are fantastic. They have my interest piqued. I want to read them. I want to know what's happening. I'm very excited about the 2 books I'm going to discuss now. So the first one is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. It is a buddy read book that I am doing on Discord with a group of people. I'm pretty sure I'm the last one to be finishing it, which is okay. The great thing about Discord is, we have it split up into the parts that the book is split up into, and you can hide your spoilers as you read so people can go back and experience whatever it is you experience for the first time without having anything ruined for them. So, love Discord. I love that this is a go at your own pace. Everyone is super friendly and super nice. I haven't felt pressured or, anything like that because I'm behind. I put that kind of pressure on myself mostly. So, yeah. And that's one of the ones where I could feel like I was getting into a slump, and I switched up from physical to audio. I've been in a very physical book mood lately, and I wholeheartedly wanted to read this book physically, But sometimes you just have to switch it up. And that's what I did. And the narration is amazing. The narrator is so good. But, as some of y'all will know, it doesn't matter how great the story is, how great the narration is, how great the writing is. If you're in a slump, it doesn't matter. So, there's the Tainted Cup. The other book is for a book club at the end of this month, the day before my birthday, and it is Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. But I should say both of these are like mystery. I think Home is Where the Bodies Are is more like mystery thriller kind of thing. But and then, well, there's murder in both. Anyway, broadly speaking, they're both mystery books. So, Home is Where the Bodies Are, like I said, for the book club. It, so far, out of the 4 books I have discussed now, been the only one that I'm not having a problem reading physically and has me completely focused on it and completely drawn into the story. Like, the TV can be on and I will be paying zero attention to it. Nothing on the TV will distract me from this book. Now, the writing is very simple, and that's not a bad thing. I think it's made it very easy to read and digest the information. I think it makes this book accessible to a wide range of readers. My sister's reading it, and she's not a big book reader, but she's really enjoying this. And I really appreciate that. I saw someone's reel on Instagram talking about certain authors having simple writing and how beneficial that is to the reading community on a large scale. Because like I said, and like they said in the video, it makes books more accessible to people of all ranges of education and background and things like that. So it is simple writing, but it is good. And the story is very engaging. It is constantly living rent free in my head, especially because there are no answers to the questions that have been brought up. So at the point at where I'm at in the story, I have no answers to any of the things that have happened. So I constantly am thinking about it. I do have it in audio as well as a backup in case I need to finish it quickly if I don't think I'm going to have time to finish it before the book club meeting. But I intend to keep reading it in the physical form. I will say also a little side note here. The Tainted Cup and Home is Where the Bodies Are have the best covers. They are both hardcover, but they do not have dust jackets. The design is printed directly on the cover. And I love that. I hope going forward, we see more books doing this. I don't know the reasoning behind the Tainted Cup, but I do know Home is Where the Bodies Are. It looks like a VHS tape. Down to the smallest detail. They did so good. It is one of the primary reasons I even bought the book. I got the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, so it even came with a case that VHS tapes used to go into. So 100 points to that author and the cover design team, the publication, everyone that was responsible in making that book did a great job. I think part of the reason I'm in my slump is because I have the 2 books I'm not very interested in, but I do have an obligation to try and finish them. And then I have these other 2 books that the obligation for them is a little bit more lax, but I'm enjoying those 2 more than the previous 2. But because the previous 2 have a higher obligation, I'm feeling guilty for not giving them attention and reading them because I want to read the other one. So then I get into this place in my head where I'm like, okay, well, I'm not reading the ones that I really should be reading. So therefore I'm going to punish myself and not read the ones that I really want to read. I know that's not that's not healthy, but that's what my brain does when I get into situations like this. So anyway, the fifth book, which I shouldn't count as a book in my reading slump. One, because it has, I think, gotten me out of my slump. We will find out tomorrow. But I also finished it today, or at the time of this recording, going out yesterday. So I'll find out Tuesday, the day this recording comes out, if I am crawling my way out of my book slump. So this is a nonfiction book. So I switched up the genre. It is called Dark Archives, a librarian's investigation into the science and history of books bound in human skin by Megan Rosenblum. It is fascinating. Like I said, I just finished it today. I still can't wrap my head around some of the things that I learned. I think we're going to do an episode in the future, and at that time I'll be able to dig a little deeper into this for y'all. But some people, when I talked about this on my Instagram stories the other day, didn't know that this was a real thing. And that right there solidified it for me even more, that we needed to do an episode on this topic at some point. I heard about it from a reel my sister sent me, because me, my sister, my mom, my dad, we're all really into true crime or things that could be considered morbid curiosities, things like that. So this Instagram page is called the Morbidly Curious Book Club. I know they just got really popular pretty much overnight, but my sister sent me a reel, and it was talking about the books that they've talked about or that they've read so far this year. And this, I think, was the first book they read this year. And the host of the book club and the Instagram page and everything, Patches is the name she goes by. She just started up a podcast called the Morbidly Curious Book Club podcast. And she interviews the authors of the books that they've read for the book club. So I listened to the podcast for the conversation with Megan Rosenblum about Dark Archives. And so I looked it up on Audible, and at this moment in time of recording, it is included in your Audible membership. So if you are interested in hearing about this, go check it out. So those are the, I guess, technically 4 books now since I finished the 5th one. Those are the 4 books I'm currently struggling between to read this month. I really truly think that because I don't have a deadline for 3 of those, that is one of the reasons why I have no immediate desire to finish them. There's no fire lit under my butt to get me to finish them. I did get a possible deadline for one of them, so I am going to aim for that deadline. I don't know if it's going to be a realistic deadline for me, but I will try my best to meet that deadline. And typically I don't work well with deadlines, but I think I need to give myself one for the other books. So maybe I'll feel more motivation to start prioritizing all of them a little more equally. going forward. But we shall see. Like I said, I finished Dark Archives. I feel really good. I'm going to start the Tainted Cup audio back up and see how I feel. I might go back a few chapters because it's been a little while since I listened to it. I'll keep y'all updated, maybe. I don't know. So hopefully that goes well. If it does, maybe I'll try to update y'all on the podcast Instagram stories or something. Okay. I do have some tips on how to get out of reading slumps. These I had some, but then other people also mentioned them. So, you know, great minds think alike. First up, I have just take the break from reading. There are so many other important things in our lives than worrying about the fact that we aren't reading anything right now. I know that's tough for some people to just sit idly when, you know, their TBRs are getting bigger or they see a bunch of other people reading, you know, all these other books and they sound really good and you're just not interested. You just don't have the focus to be reading them. But sometimes I think you can benefit from taking a break. I think we can all benefit from stepping back, taking a minute to just, I don't know, sit with ourselves. And yeah, I know it's hard when you see other people reading a whole bunch or reading books that you want to be reading, but sometimes you just need to take the break. See it as a sign of your body telling you, you know, you need to relax a little. And I know most of us find reading relaxing, but I think when we get to a point where it almost feels performative or like we're doing it for, you know, specific analytics on the different social media apps, that it sucks the fun out of it. So maybe you need that break to kind of bring you back to why you enjoy reading. I promise you, if you're part of the online book community, your followers and your friends will still be there and you can still engage with them even if you aren't posting anything. I don't post all that often and I am constantly in my DMs talking to people, my book club, the friends that I've made, commenting on their posts and encouraging them. I know it's not the same, but it's something. Lindsay at _ Lindsay suggested the same thing. She said to just lean into it. She also suggested to switch up the format from what you're usually reading. So if you're primarily listening to audiobooks, try an ebook or a physical book or vice versa. I know for me personally, you know, that kind of helped with The Tainted Cup. I was reading it physically and I was wholeheartedly set on reading the physical copy of it, but I had to switch to the audiobook and I think that was helping. And I think it's going to help going forward to continue with the audiobook. If you don't like audiobooks, you know, switch from an ebook to a physical or physical to ebook. You don't even have to have an e-reader to read the ebooks. You can just get the Kindle or the Nook app on your phone or your tablet or iPad or whatever, and you can read that way. I know for me personally, that's not my favorite way to read. I do prefer my actual Kindle or my Nook, especially if I'm going to read at night. That way I don't have to worry about my reading light being charged, or I now have as a backup a obnoxiously bright headlamp. Even on its lowest setting, it pretty much lights up the whole room. So it's not the best, but I make it work. So if I do have the choice or the option, I will try to read an ebook on an e-reader when it's, time for bed. Doesn't always work out that way, especially right now because I am reading more physical books. But anyway. Lindsay and her co-host Magda did a episode on this topic on their podcast. So go check them out. It's Literally Books, the podcast. They had some good tips on there as well. What typically worked for me in the past and currently worked for me just recently today is switching up the genre. So, like if you've been reading a lot of fantasy, try reading another genre that you love. If you enjoy smut in your books, but you've been reading softer romances, maybe you should switch it up and read something absolutely filthy. And that might help get you out of your slump. I usually end up switching to a nonfiction book, and that seems to help a great deal, especially if it's an audiobook. I have a very hard time visually reading a nonfiction book, but if you give me the audiobook, I can consume it and remember things very easily for some reason. Like I said, I do like audiobooks a lot. But if for some reason I'm not feeling audiobooks and I still want to listen to something at work, I have been listening to podcasts. I do try to listen to book podcasts to try to get recommendations of books that might help me get out of my slump. Sometimes it's a little tough to do that because most of those podcasts are talking about specific books. So it is very hard to avoid spoilers sometimes. So you got to be careful with that. But it has helped in the past to get suggestions of books that could potentially get me out of my slump. Ooh, this one is also a personal favorite of mine. Try rereading like your absolute favorite book of all time. The familiarity can be comforting. It will be low pressure, low stress on you. Hopefully it can light that spark. It can give you that excited feeling you get when you're reading a book you love. I have had this help in the past where I'll read or listen to one of my favorite books because I know I'll enjoy it. I know it'll get me happy and I'll be excited to start something else after that. Now, this isn't always the case. Currently, I am refusing to listen to Leather and Lark until I finish all of my current books because I loved the first book of that series so much. I listened to it at least 5 or 6 times. It is ridiculous how many times I listened to that book, but I absolutely loved it. So I am very terrified that if I listen to the second book and if I love it just as much, it is going to end up making my slump worse. So we're going to wait till we get out of this slump before we potentially put ourselves into another. But of course, I will keep y'all updated when I do start that. I actually had 2 friends write in this next tip, which is try reading novellas. So my friends Liz at Elizabeth159 and my friend BB or Birgit, you'll have to tell me if I said that right. She is Run BB Run on Instagram, but they both wrote in and said to try reading novellas. I think that is a fantastic idea. I haven't personally tried that, but if I don't get out of this current slump that I'm in by starting The Tainted Cup again tomorrow, I may try this. Because if you think about it, like novellas are short, they're to the point, they're not a lot of stress to read. If you can find one that is kind of a standalone, even better. If you can find one that's in a series that you already love and enjoy, that's also great. You'll have some sort of, comfort in knowing the world that it's taking place in. So yeah, novellas I think are a fantastic idea, and I will be trying that next if this doesn't work. My friend Hema at the _book_monsta on Instagram said, throw everything on your TBR out the window and let your mood pick your next read. I think that's also a great idea. I do think a lot of us are mood readers, and I think some of us try really hard to have a TBR, and then our mood reading soul kind of revolts against that. So if you're struggling and you haven't started a book, forget all the books that you thought you wanted to read and just go with whatever your gut or your mood is telling you to try. I think that's a really great idea. My co-host that could not be here, Elaine, she is at Los Libros de Elaine. There's a period in between each word in her Instagram handle. She said, try going to the library and browse the selections that they have. Find a few books you like and try reading the first chapters and see if anything gets you hooked. I think that's also a really good idea. If you have a local library you can go to, go walk around. Our library cards are usually free. If for some reason, I know Austin, for example, if you live outside of their zones or whatever, it's like $100 and something a year, which that can be pretty pricey. So last time I looked, and if you're looking for a digital library card, which I know is not the same as going in and browsing, but it's something. I do know the Houston Public Library in Texas. If you are a Texas resident, anywhere in the state, doesn't matter where, you can get a free digital library card for the Houston Public Library. You just have to pick a home location, I guess. But if you are out of state, last time I checked, it was only $5 a year. That's not a bad price. Yeah. Browsing the library, whether it be physically, which I think would be ideal in this case, but if not, digital works just as good, in my opinion. I think that's it for the tips that I have written down. I did ask also for some book recommendations that have helped people get out of their slumps. So I just got a few. So we have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. That was submitted by my friend Claire. Her Instagram handle is beers_and_books. I got the Midnight Library by Matt Haig, probably saying that wrong. Lindsay at _literally Lindsay submitted that one. Elaine submitted the next two. I love the titles of the books in this series. That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming, and Railed by the Easter Bunny by Dahlia Davies. I have read Railed by the Easter Bunny, so I will say that if you want something smutty and you want to dabble in monster romance, go ahead and give that one a try. The next two were recommended by Hema. She's put The Will of the Many by James Islington and Funny Story by Emily Henry. So she also did put in there that she switched up genres when she read that. So that's also what helped her get out of the slump with that book in particular. So yeah, those are the tips I have and that I got from people. Those are some of the recommendations I got. I personally can't think of a book to recommend to you to get out of a slump. You know what? Read Dark Archives. If you like nonfiction and you don't mind things that can be a little gross. Anyway, I will do a little What This Week and some podcast updates for you. as I already mentioned, currently reading Home is Where the Bodies Are, The Tainted Cup, A Little Life, and Everlasting. I just finished Dark Archives, so I will restart The Tainted Cup. Because I was off on Friday, unexpectedly, I am completely caught up on Bridgerton and Queen Charlotte. So, because I am caught up, and so are Elaine and Liana, I think the next few episodes will be discussions about the shows. I know Elaine and I haven't read any of the books that the show is based off of. Liana has. So, hopefully we'll get a little bit of insight on the books versus the TV show. I can't wait to talk about it with somebody because my husband doesn't watch it and I'm trying not to spoil it for anybody. So it'll be good to finally talk to people about the show. I think that's it for updates. I would like to mention a few podcasts. I already mentioned Literally Books, the podcast. Go check them out. Lindsay and Magda host that one. The Morbidly Curious Book Club podcast and the Bridgerton Bros has been a very fun podcast to listen to. They do an episode per show episode, and they've done all the seasons. They did a few movies. They have these two women come on to the show that have read the books and tell them all about the differences and the characters that are made up for the show and things like that. It's very fascinating. I've learned a lot from listening to that podcast. So I'm curious to see when they release this latest one, and to hear what the two women think that have read all the books, see what they think about season 3 of Bridgerton. That's it for podcast updates. I would just like to say this was weird doing by myself. This is the first solo episode. There may be some in the future. I might try to get some guests on next time if I can. But hopefully, like I said at the beginning, this wasn't too boring for you. Hopefully it wasn't too awkward. As always, thank you, listener, for joining me. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on our socials. We are Book Talk Babes Pod on Instagram and TikTok, and then just Book Talk Babes on Goodreads and StoryGraph. Please email us topics, questions, and book recommendations to booktalkbabespod@gmail.com, or you can DM us on any of the socials. Everything is listed in the description. Have a lovely day and week. Until next time. Bye.